In the 92 years, advocate George Bizos touched thousands of lives, and this is reflected in the tributes pouring in from far and wide. For more reaction to his passing, I'm joined on the line by Elinor Sisulu, a writer, human rights activist and political analyst. But before we get into our discussion, I'd like us to reflect on a tweet that was written out by Elinor Sisulu. This tweet here saying, Dennis Goldberg, Andrew Mlangeni and George Bizos gone in quick succession. Our living history is disappearing. Elinor, if you're on the line, very good morning to you and thank you for your time. You brought out this tweet. I just want you to talk a little bit about what exactly you meant as you speak about our living history disappearing, especially for a country such as South Africa and the raw history that we lived in.
Well, I'm concerned that, while these people are alive, we don't take the opportunity to know more about them. I think especially for the younger generation, those of us who've been enormously blessed to live with caliber of leaders such as these, know about them through our interaction with them. And we've also read their books. I had to do a lot of research on the Rivonia trial, and as part of writing my book. So I got to talk to all of them, and they were all extraordinary people in their own right. And I feel sad as a generation that they've passed on, and I wonder how far there's that transfer of knowledge between generations, from one generation to another. So, yes, so it was just, living history, seeing George Bizos around, and he didn't allow age to deter him. He attended events, and one could talk to him directly. And now his physical presence is no longer there, so we have to rely on what he's written. And fortunately, he wrote books, and so we have books about him. And Dennis, I'm not so sure about Uncle Andrew, but I think they were such incredibly great people, and their lives had so many lessons for us. And I hope that those lessons are not lost to the future generations.
As you speak about those lessons, and you mention the importance of those lessons, looking at the legal fraternity and looking at the resilience of young people in the country, what do you think is important to look back at when you think of men such as Advocate George Bizos?
Well, it was their integrity, their honesty, their courage, because they operated in very difficult times. And I think it was a whole generation of incredible jurists that were actually respected not only in South Africa but internationally as well. And, we still have Dikgang Moseneke as one of those people who's just written a book, who had both been a political prisoner and then rose to become Deputy Chief Justice. So, those kind of people are they're really living treasures. And, for George Bizos, there's a beautiful film that was made called Life is Beautiful, based on Dennis Goldberg's statement when they were given a life sentence at the Rivonia trial. And he said, life is beautiful. And that film shows the Rivonia trial and the whole experience George spoke often about it, about the lawyers and the defendants who actually were comrades, and how that trial changed the lives of everybody who was involved.
Now, as we reflect on his contribution to the fight for human rights in South Africa, what do you believe is the kind of legacy that George Bizos leaves behind?
Well, he leaves a legal legacy, and I'm sure people in the Legal Resources Center will talk about that. A legacy of, legal assistance for people who can't afford it. And he put a lot of his time into that. And that the law should work for the poorest of the poor, and this is an ongoing struggle that must be faced. I think another legacy he leaves for me is that George came to this country as a refugee, as a young refugee, and he was able to get educated in very difficult circumstances and practice as a human rights lawyer. And I think that legacy of human rights, but also a legacy of community, that George was part of the Greek community as a Greek person, ethnically, and he was part of a political community which was the ANC, but he was respected beyond. In fact, he was respected by all political prisoners, and he was also part of a broader South African family. So I think the legacy he leaves is that you can transcend difficulties that you grew up with, and you can transcend boundaries and divisions between people while maintaining your own identity. And that's something I respect very much about George. And I respect his family too. I think we must pay tribute to his sons, Alex, Damon, Kimon, and the 7 grandchildren, because as a family, they always supported George, and him and his wife, they were an amazing family.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, human rights activist Elinor Sisulu, talking about the kind of lessons that are learned from advocate George Bizos, and saying that it's important for young people to continue to be resilient after tweeting that our living history is disappearing. We'll continue to bring you more as we track the reaction following the passing of the human rights stalwart in a short while. Stay tuned.